It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, March 6th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that thinks, these Flyers injuries are going to have an effect on the tough road ahead that the Flyers have on the schedule.
Yeah, it's gonna make things bumpy.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We, as a show, are on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well at Locked On Flyers. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, you were just stretching there a little bit. I feel you on that
Oh yeah,
because
it's a rainy day. You got to stretch it out.
got to stretch it out. And with all these Flyers injuries, I feel more, attuned to that and I got to do my stretches as well. Speaking of injuries, not much news given that yesterday was an off day. Kevin Kurz said that Nick Seeler could miss a little bit of time, but that he heard that it's not a long-term injury.
Yeah, so he's probably got a bone bruise or something, but he'll probably miss a game or two. And right now, this time of the year, if you are truly making a playoff push, there is a point where some guys are going to need some rest, or because just giving them practice off for some teams would be enough, but I don't think for this one it is because of the way they play the game. So we'll get more into it, but there's a balancing act going on right now, and it's going to be hard. It's going to you might, the way things are, you might go another 7, 8, 10 games until you have the full lineup again.
Right. And, we're going to look at the specifics of the schedule in the next segment to show kind of how rough it's going to be and how
Yeah.
this could affect this playoff race that the team is in. But in the meantime, yeah, this balancing act is a very delicate one given the injuries. How do you ice the most effective lineup, given who you're missing, and then manage the trade deadline at the same time?
Right.
Because the bench is a little shorter than it was, and I think it's the most apparent for the blue line for the Flyers, where you have Jamie Drysdale, Rasmus Ristolainen, and now Nick Seeler out for 2 to whatever number of games here, right?
Yeah, and so with Drysdale, we don't know. I mentioned that thing about when he was at Oxford Valley, but we don't know how much longer he'll be out. He could be out a week. He could be out, 2 more games. We don't know. So you take that into account and you say, okay, Drysdale is going to miss a certain amount of time. Sealer, probably a game or two, like we said. And then Risto, for some reason, I think he's coming back after the deadline. Call me crazy. Take that however you want, but that's what I think's happening.
Right. And, when we talked about Sealer, and so that's 3 defensemen out. And, we've had an embarrassment of 8 defensemen on the team for a while now. And now, we're down 3 of them. And it's it's really interesting because, obviously you'd prefer to not play Mark Stahl, but now you're in a situation where you almost have to if Sealer is now out. But what it does do is give Ronnie Attard a shot.
Yeah, it gives Adder a shot, and it gives Zamula more responsibility and not just being that extra defenseman. And I think those two things are key because, again, Zamula, you need to find out about. You need to find out about because there's an impending contract with him, right? And
Right.
Adder, you need to find out about because, let's face it, I mean, it's hard to tell, and we brought this up a little bit the other day. It's hard to tell whether the Flyers believe in him or not.
Right. Now, the situation with Stahl, you now have to play him, right?
Yes.
So is there a world where you can't where they decide they can't trade Mark Stahl because they're out of guys? Now, I understand there's the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, and they could do another call-up, and that is something that I would probably recommend, but in the world of the Flyers, it doesn't seem like that's something they might do. Now, they might bring up Belpedio. I do
Right.
think that's an option for them that they
It
would
is.
do. So, but do you, like, just keep Stahl because of the situation, or do you bring up Belpedio and still try and trade Stahl?
So, like, why not just keep everybody because of the situation? Like, if that happens, again, there's going to be a price to pay for that too. So, how many games are we really talking? We're not talking that many games. Guys will start to come back. So, if you bring up
Right.
Elpidio for a game, it's fine. That's what you have to do. Go look at who Tampa played a couple weeks ago against the Flyers. They were playing guys
Listen.
you didn't even know. So, I
Right.
mean, teams have to
Yeah.
do that at times. I know John Tortorella doesn't like to do that, but listen, any kind of draft pick for Mark Stahl, you got to make that trade.
Yeah, and I think that's where the question lies because, there's, I would say, 2 games affected here, maximum in terms of the trade deadline because the deadline's in 2 days, right? And so
Yeah.
there's a game Thursday, there's a game Saturday. I would say those are the 2 games that you can't really mess around with.
Well, I
Um,
mean, so here's another thing, another layer here. I like to always peel back those layers. Um, you might have to bring up Elpidio anyhow, simply because if Walker's close to being traded, you might have to pull him from the game last minute.
Right. Well, and that's like the next step of this to get
Right.
to is how this affects the trade deadline. Is it going to make them not want to trade anybody, to your point?
Hmm.
And is it going to be more difficult to trade Nick Seeler at this point because of the injury? Even though it isn't severe, are they saying it isn't severe because of the trade deadline? Or,
No, I think
I
they're. I mean, what's true is source. So, like, there's no way of
yeah.
knowing, right? But yeah, it's probably going to make teams think about it.
Right, and so I think that they should not change the game plan, to your point. I think they can call up Belpedio
Yep.
easily, they can call up Mete easily,
Yeah.
which they've already done this year. I mean,
Yep.
I would give Jennings a shot, but I'm just saying from a realistic standpoint, I think
Right.
Belpedio and Mete are call-upable from
Yeah.
this group, right?
Yeah. There's no question they are, and this is what you might have to do. We'll know. Like next game, if Walker's in the lineup, I would say odds of him getting traded aren't great. Doesn't mean he won't, but I'd say not great. Again, I think there was these last minute discussions going on that they just haven't got to a point where they're comfortable with a contract. So we keep hearing that maybe he's going to get traded, but they're iffy. But as far as a
Yeah.
big return here, I don't think the Flyers have any deal that could happen that's getting them a big return. So I think from 2 months ago, what the hopes and dreams were maybe of Flyers fans getting like a first round pick, I don't see it. I don't know where it's
No.
coming from. I so I don't, and I don't think they're trading Scott Lawton. So I don't think that's coming. So could they even get a second at this deadline? I don't know. They might not be able to.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think it would depend on who they were dealing with and,
right,
if there was a sweetener in the deal of some sort,
right.
in terms of doing the math, or could the Flyers eat some cap space and get the draft pick in return bumped up a little bit to compensate? I think those options are there, but, I wouldn't mind another second round pick in this upcoming draft.
No, it
I
would be
think
good to have actually,
it would be really good to
because
have,
you don't
and
know if
that
you're
would
gonna
give
have the 2 firsts aren't guaranteed yet. You don't know.
correct, correct. So, if it's a high second round pick, I think that's, pretty decent return on any of the people that they're thinking about trading. But, this also affects the forward lines now too with, Travis Konechny still out, not sure when he's
With
returning. They've
non-contact, so you figure he's not coming back till after the deadline.
Right, and then Sean Couturier, they've been very deliberate with his ice time. Is there an opportunity to sit him for a
I
game here with
I
all
would sit
this?
him in one of these 2 games. I really would, simply because and I'm not saying you're throwing up the white flag. What I'm saying is, if you really want to gear up for the playoffs, You can't keep going on with Sean Couturier on the fourth line. That is not going to be the way to charge into the playoffs. He has to play his regular position. He has to be feeling good enough to play in his regular position. So if that means a game or two off or a game off once in a blue moon, then that's what you need to do down the stretch.
Right, and I think that's a perfect way to transition to the next part of the conversation, which is, the next set of games. So we're looking at the games for the rest of this month. Where could we potentially rest Sean Couturier? We will talk about that coming up next.
It's an important point in the season, Flyers fans. The team is in the thick of the playoff hunt. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you could win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Fans also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, and when they're in season on Sleeper and entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether NHL superstars like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, or Austin Matthews, plus Flyer standouts like Tyson Forster will record more or less than the Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flyers fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, so start paying attention and nail your picks so you could start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. On tomorrow's show, we will be previewing the first game in this difficult stretch, the Philadelphia Flyers versus the Florida Panthers. Plus, we are going to do a draft-eligible prospect profile of Dean Letourneau, who is a listener request. So you can get those prospects you're interested in covered on the show if you send them in to us. Looking at this schedule and thinking back to the conversation about Sean Couturier, these first 2 games, Thursday and Saturday, at Florida, at Tampa Bay, going to be really rough. And I'm just not sure that these are the 2 games that you sit Couturier for, but it's going to be a really difficult start on the road for this stretch.
Yeah, I mean, there's never a good game. So I just think do it before the deadline because things are going to change after the deadline, no matter who you're playing. So I know everybody's going to say, well, do it against San Jose. Well, okay. But I mean, again, then you're playing Couturier 2 more games at 40 or 50%. Is that better? Or is it better to rest him for one of these games and then have him 100%, maybe for the next 4 or 5 or 6 or 7? Because we haven't seen him at 100%. So there has to be a way.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult now, right? Because
Mhm.
to your point, where you only have 1 game before the deadline, it's at Florida, who is a Stanley Cup favorite at this point. So I think that it's going to be next to impossible for them to sit Couturier for this game. But I
But
do
he's going to
think
go up against Barkov playing 75%. Is that good either?
no. Yeah, I mean, there's no winning situation
No,
here.
there isn't.
There really isn't. And so, my guess is that they're going to put him in, limit his time, and put him out for the key face-offs.
Right.
And that's like the world we're going to have to live in for that. But I think that
You're right.
it's a fair point. I just don't think it's possible given everything we know about this team. I do think it's possible for them to sit him after the trade deadline. I think there's one or two options here, but that's it. And I think, San Jose is the one or two options here. Now, it's a home game, so it's also very difficult to think they would rest their captain for a home game.
Hmm.
So,
That's what I'm
that adds
saying. None of these are
an
ideal.
extra. Yeah. Yeah. So San Jose is the one lighter game next Tuesday. But then after that, we go into this stretch that's Toronto at Boston, Toronto at Carolina, Boston, Florida, Rangers. I mean, that is the gauntlet of all
It is.
gauntlets.
It is. That's big. So, do you want him? That's my whole thing. Have him ready for that. However you're going to do it.
Yeah, because I think those, couple of weeks are going to be the determining weeks. Is this team going to make the
Yeah.
playoffs or not? And they're going to have to win some of those games.
Yep.
And they have to win, I would say, 2/3 of those games.
Yeah, and survive.
Right. And the thing about the Toronto games in particular is that, I think Toronto's pretty solidly going to make the playoffs in the top 3 in the division, but it's like we're not even playing against the Atlantic Division teams that are in the wild card race, right?
Right.
Except for Tampa,
Right.
who could potentially be in one of those spots, right?
Yes.
But there's one game against them, but you're looking at 2 games against Toronto, 2 games against Boston, neither of which are direct, 2 games against Florida. Those are the top 3 teams in the
Right.
Atlantic,
Yep.
right? So you can't even gain wild card ground on those
No.
teams.
No, and that's why a lot of people keep asking me, why do you think it's third place or bust? That's a reason why.
Yeah, exactly. And, to sprinkle in the Canes and the Rangers almost seems cruel at this point.
Hockey, listen, it's not cruel from like the schedule maker's not cruel. This is TV. Be mad at TV.
No,
They want these
totally.
matchups, and this is all TV driven.
Yeah, it's really interesting, though. I will say that given what we knew about the Flyers preseason and when these schedules were being made, to think that there's this string of games for the Flyers against all these top teams that aren't on national TV because the expectations weren't there. And now they're big games, with big implications for
And I think
for
some of
both
them,
teams.
right. And I think some of them can be flexed. I forget. I think TBS has the
Right.
ability to do that.
Right. So, we have one of them that's on NHL Network, one of the Boston games later this
Right.
month. But right now, and one ESPN Plus Hulu exclusive game.
Which means
Uh,
nobody gets to see that.
right. Right. Now I understand with the US team versus a Canadian team, there's like weirdness that goes on there in terms of flexing those games. But yeah, I think that I don't know if they were looking for like these teams which were considered more top teams to have an easier road at the end of the season and play
Yeah,
a
I
team
don't
like the
know.
Flyers. But I do think it has turned into this absolute nightmare fuel schedule for the Flyers.
Yeah,
And that's honestly, and that's part of the reason why it's so frustrating when they only get one of the 2 points against St. Louis, right?
correct. Because it's just getting harder, except for San Jose.
Yep. Yep. And, there's a little bit of a sort of breather at the tail end of March with a game in Montreal and then the one visit for Connor Bedard to the Wells Fargo Center to round out the month
Which
against the
everybody's been
Blackhawks.
waiting for. We've all been waiting for
Yeah.
this.
Right.
My goodness.
I know.
I
I
looked at it
know.
and it was like, oh my God, it's never going to get here.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that the Montreal game is going to be a trap game. Absolutely. It always is
Yes.
for the Flyers.
And they have some rats on that team that they're going to start trouble.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's not going to be easy by any stretch, but at least it'll not be the Rangers, the Panthers,
Right.
the Bruins, or the
Right.
Leafs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's fair. That's fair to say.
Yeah. So, there's going to be some really big decisions to be made lineup wise this month. It's going to be very like maintenance is going to be extremely important this month.
Yeah.
And
Forget
it's
practicing the power play. Nobody's going to be healthy enough to do it.
Could be. All right. We have some excellent mailbag questions from y'all related to trade deadline and the Phantoms, Mitchkoff, and more coming up next.
We're driven by the search for better when it comes to hiring. The best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match. With Indeed, use Indeed scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of Locked On will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league like Locked On NHL. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. Starting off strong, Joel wants to know, how many moves do you think the Flyers will do? And do you think we'll see any big surprises? He also mentions the market price about, potentially leading to them re-signing Walker and Seeler.
I'm going to say 2, maybe 3. And I'll say the surprise would be like Morgan Frost, that
Yeah,
he gets traded.
that would be a huge surprise, I think. Just given the conversation. Now, 6 months ago, it would not be a surprising conversation to have, but given how things have gone, I think it would be a huge surprise
There's just this
at
thing in the
this
back of
point.
my head that says it's possible. That's all. I don't have any
Right.
sources or anything on that. Walker, I think he's getting $4 million. And I told you, if I was going to pay him $4 million, which I really don't want to ever, it'd be for 2 years, but it's going to be longer. If he stays, it's somewhere like 3 to 5 years.
Yep. I think
That's
that's correct. Paul wants to know, when are the Flyers going to move on from Ian LaPerriere? He's failed as a coach in every opportunity and every level. From the eye in the sky assistant, worst PKs as a PK coach, and now, as head coach of the Phantoms and running a different system.
Yeah, I think he was good at the beginning as a developmental guy, but then as he went up the ladder, I did think he got worse. I know he's well liked, but at some point, you even have to fire your friends, and I think they should move on from him. I think when this season ends, that's when it should happen.
Yeah, and I see him being really effective as a one-on-one coach, right?
Yeah,
He's good at motivating, and I think in terms of individual play, I think he's good at seeing the game in terms of what individual guys need to improve, but, you know, the whole isn't greater than the sum of its parts here. And I
no,
think I think that's what's happening, and I think they're just gonna wait till the off season at this point
yeah,
and make some holistic decisions here.
holistic.
It's a good word.
It is.
I like it. Clobbering time wants to know, which I love that username, by the way. A good Fantastic Four reference here. When Mitchkoff comes up for us from the KHL, is that a league that will have him ready to play in the NHL, or will he start in Lehigh Valley?
I'm going to say not yet. We've talked about his play away from the puck. It was talked about on Twitter. I retweeted it. Lassie Alleman, who works at EP Ringside, had about a 4-tweet discussion about that. He's one of the European scouts. I suggest you look at it, and that'll show you that the work that has to be done. So you don't want him to rush over from the KHL because of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think we'll take these next 2 years to see if he makes those improvements, right? Then
Yeah,
maybe he can go directly to the NHL.
right.
But it could also be a case of play 20 games in the AHL and then move up, and then that's
It
that.
could.
That is not out of the realm of possibility either. At Kreger 2104, the Flyers seem to have a lot of defensemen in the system who have not appeared on the roster yet, including a lot of the younger players currently on the Phantoms. Which defenseman on the Phantoms do you see will be a regular part of the Flyers defense in the future, and which do you think have trade value?
Well, I mean, nobody has trade value from like an AHL trade standpoint, and even a Belpedio doesn't really have great appeal around the league. Mete either. Um, they didn't show enough in the AHL for teams to to say that they want them. So, uh, based on that, again, we have to see if the Flyers how much they believe in these guys, because I think Andre is a season away or a half a season away. I think he does need a little more. We agree he looks good on the power play. He's pretty comfortable there. 5-on-5, he's comfortable skating and moving the puck, but I think there's defensive issues there. 5-on-5, even though he's feisty, he needs to get a little stronger. Those kinds of things. Adard, I think, is like right on the precipice. Like I think he can make the team next year. Um, Yinning is very close. Yinning again is a guy that could play on the third pairing now, I believe, but let him get through the season. Even if he has to start next season and wait for an opportunity, okay. But I think he's a guy that they should hold on to because he's pretty damn smart, safe with the puck, skates well. Like you don't see him making a lot of mistakes, right, Rach?
Right.
So those are their main ones.
Yeah, I think the interesting question here will be Helge Grans, because I feel
Yeah.
like he's just kind of there and he's expendable. It's not that he's bad. I just think he's
I
not
don't think he's been
special.
used right. Like I don't think we
Yeah.
haven't really been able to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, it's just been a really awkward year for him. And
Yeah.
so if a team wants another depth or prospect defenseman to throw in to maybe bump up a pick from a fourth round to a third round in return in a deal for somebody else, sure.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
just I don't have any problem with that. But I think, yeah, Andre, they like Ethan Sampson a lot,
Yeah,
but
we do
he
too,
has
but he's a couple years away.
yeah, he just has a lot of work to do. So I think it'll take some time. But I do think that, there are some guys that they do like, and I think there's some guys that are expendable, and I would throw in as an extra piece, like Grons. I think he's just one of
Yeah,
those
no, I'm
guys.
with you on that. That's a good call.
James Rushensky, 8602, wants to know if the Drysdale injury will affect possibly trading defensemen. And yeah, we talked about that.
Yes,
Um,
it could.
absolutely.
And
It,
really,
it
we
can make
don't know because we haven't been given like a schedule for them to return, so it's hard to say. But they know.
Yeah, they do. But again, 2 more days until we know for sure. Michael wants to know, is Scott Lawton raising his value to be worth a first round pick in a trade or a top prospect in return?
I think like not a top prospect, but like a team's third or fourth, something like that. I don't think he's worth a first because I don't think he's a full time center on a really good team. So, but he does a lot of good things, and I do think he could pull a good prospect. But in the end, I don't think he's getting traded.
Yeah, I think if there's a team that has like a weak PK that wants a PK specialist,
Right.
maybe they'd be willing to pay more, but I still don't know
Maybe.
that it'd be a first rounder. Um, Michael had several questions, but
Okay.
one of them I thought was just a fun one for us to answer. And so he had wanted to know what Funkos are normally behind you, Russ, which they're not today because you're sitting in a different
I've been
spot.
banished to a different part of the home um, to do this show. It's the Schitt's Creek family. So it's funny because I would say about 3 years ago, I called a buddy who owns a card shop and said, "Hey, can you track these down for me?" Because they were getting hard to find. And the hardest one is David. So if you notice, David came in like this hard plastic case, right? Because he's the most valuable. My cat walks all over them, like they get
Yeah.
knocked down. But I like them there because I love the show. And I do believe this is the one thing. I believe a movie is on the horizon. And I do think
Mm.
David Levy's working on it, but not David. What's it? Um, What's his first name now? David from the show. Well, whatever. I know he's a Levy. Dan Levy, right? So
Yeah.
Dan, yeah, I think
Yeah.
Dan's working on a script. That's just a guess.
Right. Yeah, I love that show. It's a real good one. And then behind me is yeah, they're very small here to see them, but this is I have varied interests, and I'm a big fan of David Bowie, and I'm also a big fan of Doctor Who, which I have mentioned on the show. And this is the overlap. I have some friends that we are big David Bowie / Doctor Who fans, and so this is a representation of all of the doctors up to Jodie Whittaker in outfits worn by David Bowie. So it's all pictures of David Bowie that look like the
That's
costumes
funny.
that each of the doctors wore up through Jodie Whittaker. But the joke is that the picture of Jodie Whittaker is actually Tilda Swinton, who looks exactly like David Bowie. So
There you go.
it's a deep cut there.
That's a deep one.
Very specific reference that me and two friends have shared. There's 3 of these in the world, and all 3 of us have this in our homes. That will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. Tomorrow we will have that prospect profile of Dean Letourneau. We're going to talk about the Panthers and any trade deadline updates that are out there. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got mailbag questions you want us to answer, you can send them in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology. SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.